In today's episode, we are going to discuss the language of cinema since the days of shadow play. Standard history books confirm that cinema has been invented in 1895. Well, in 1895, it was the apparatus called cinematograph that had been invented. But the language of cinema evolved through practice, and it inherited the audiovisual culture that existed in the pre-cinema days, since the days of magic lantern and shadow play. What is shadow play? Shadow play was invented probably in China, and when it was invented we do not know. But we do know that the technique of shadow play was brought to Europe and America by the traveling businessmen who sailed to China, and they went back to Europe with the knowledge of shadow play. So shadow play actually came from China to Europe around 16th century. So 16th, 17th, 18th and 19th century, these 400 years, shadow play evolved in Europe and became a very, very popular art. Well, shadow play used a light source, a screen, and cut out figures manipulated with string or with thin stick. Along with the images moving on screen, we have also music and a narrator narrating the story. Also actors behind the scene, behind the screen, enacting all the roles. So it was theatre-like, but not live actors, but the shadow cutouts figures, they performed, and it became a very, very popular art form. Shadow play was so popular as a form that even famous poet Goethe once produced a shadow play. So it reached acceptability. It was considered as a recognized art form. The art of shadow play became more sophisticated, more interesting when it incorporated magic lantern, which was another form of popular entertainment. Magic lantern was a projection system, a very primitive projection system that was there in Europe since 16th century. It used a kind of very primitive technology with a light source and a lens and hand-drawn pictures on glass plate. As time progressed in 18th century and towards the 19th century, beginning of 19th century, the magic lantern slides become more and more sophisticated, more and more interesting. The design of the magic lantern was such that it became portable, and sometimes one projector mounted on top of another made it possible to present continuously a slideshow. These slideshows were narrative slideshows, storytelling slideshows, and this magic lantern showman was actually a skilled storyteller, operator, designer, and a mechanic, all in one. The magic lantern showman would actually go from one city to another, from village to village, to the fairground, and will hold his show. And these shows were very, very popular among kids as well as among the adults. Hand-drawn slides were manipulated in such a manner that they would create effect of movement on screen. Sometimes story elements, characters would move, like maybe a clown jumping, or a fisherman catching a fish, or various other small action that could be created by the magic lantern slides. One of the most popular form of entertainment through magic lantern was ghost stories. It was very, very popular. In 1797, Etienne Robertson in France developed a new concept of magic lantern show. It was called Phantasmagoria. He converted a small church into an auditorium. A number of magic lanterns mounted on wheels were installed in different hidden corners of the church. Once the auditorium was darkened, the ghost images started appearing all over. He even used smoke on which ghost images were projected, and they looked like ghosts were moving. The ghosts were hand-drawn slides were colorful, moving, and manipulated in such a manner that it created tremendous effect on the audience. Robertson achieved zoom effect by pushing or pulling the magic lanterns on wheel. The hidden lanterns created such impact on the audience that many of the members of the audience fainted. Some gentlemen in the audience actually drew swords to fight the ghosts. The Phantasmagoria confirmed that with the help of magic lantern and by manipulating the magic lantern, one could actually create a complete horror show, and it could achieve a kind of nightmarish effect. The appeal of this kind of shows were so far-reaching that it traveled all over Europe. Along with magic lantern, a concept in science developed, and that was called persistence of vision. It means that the retina of the eye can retain the impression of an image for a fraction of a second longer than the actual image. To prove that persistence of vision was a scientific phenomenon, several scientific toys were developed to demonstrate persistence of vision. And the theory of persistence of vision was actually propagated by two eminent physicists of the time, Peter Rogét and Michael Faraday. Both of them were actually working in other fields. At the same time, they were also interested in persistence of vision. In 1832, Joseph Plato developed a small scientific toy called Phenakistoscope to demonstrate persistence of vision. Phenakistoscope was a very simple device. It was a rotating disc with cutouts and hand-drawn images inside the disc. The hand-drawn images were actually illustrating phases of one simple action, like a dance or some kind of movement. Once the Phenakistoscope disc was held in front of a mirror, the viewer is supposed to look through the hole on the reflection of the mirror, and by rotating the disc, once you achieve the perfect speed, you will see the image moving. Following the success of Phenakistoscope in 1832, in 1834, another small scientific device was developed by William Horner, and it was called zoetrope. It was like a bowl with slots cut on the outer side, and hand-drawn pictures on paper was inserted in the inner circle. The principle was same, that you have to rotate the ball, and once you achieve a perfect speed, you see the image moving. The movement thus created was repetitive, so you see the same action happening again and again as if it was in a loop, but nevertheless it was quite a remarkable achievement. And once this toy became very popular, the many people started producing these similar toys, and all kinds of fascinating hand-drawn designs, hand-drawn phases of movement were created by nameless people. The culture of zoetrope and phenakistoscope to create illusion of movement was popular since 1832 till 1840 or even later. The next major invention in the same line was the device or the apparatus called Praxinoscope Projector, which was designed by Émile Reynaud in France. What Reynaud achieved was something significant in the sense that both zoetrope and Praxinoscope was a kind of peep show machine. You have to look through the hole to see the image moving. What Reynaud managed to achieve was this: he was successful in combining the zoetrope, the technique of zoetrope, with the magic lantern. So from peep show, it became a projected show for a larger audience, from single audience to larger audience. So he combined the magic lantern with the zoetrope. And it was a unique development because this led to animation actually. As Reynaud modified his technique and he designed bigger and better Praxinoscope projector, he could actually create animation, and he was actually father of animation, and he was successful in doing this in 1880. When we talk about 1880, we must remember that around this time, photography had also become very popular. So glass plate negatives was replacing hand-drawn paintings on glass. When Émile Reynaud was developing his Praxinoscope projector, at around that time, Edward Muybridge, a British photographer stationed in America, was actually busy in recording movements of all kinds, especially movements of human beings and animals in photography. So he was interested in capturing phases of movement in a series of photographs. He started using sometimes 12 cameras, sometimes 24 cameras, all mounted next to each other, and through that he was able to create series photography or sequence photography, capturing motion, capturing movement. When Reynaud's Praxinoscope projector became successful, Muybridge was interested enough to adapt that to project his sequence photography or series photography on screen. And he developed a new machine called Praxinoscope, which was a kind of rotating disc mounted on magic lantern to create the impression of movement. And he was successful to actually animate his still photographs. These still photographs, we have to keep in mind, were captured by not one camera but many cameras, 12 to 24 cameras, and which he called his project, he called it Animal Locomotion. And with his new equipment, new gadget, the new magic lantern called Praxinoscope, he was successful to animate his moving photographs, his still photographs as moving images. And this created really a kind of sensation that for the first time, not hand-drawn pictures, but sequence photography could be presented as moving images. Edward Muybridge developed his Praxinoscope projector in 1881. Next year, in 1882, Etienne Marie, a French physiologist, developed another apparatus, and it was called chronophotographic gun. It was actually a gun which he modified and turned into a camera. By pulling the trigger of the gun, he could manage to capture one image. The term that we use now, that we go and shoot a film, actually came from this practice of chronophotographic gun. And what Etienne Marie managed to achieve was that instead of using 12 to 24 cameras as Maybridge did, he managed to capture sequence photography by using one camera. As you can see, we are coming closer to cinema. One single camera capable of capturing phased out or sequenced photography, meaning that action could be recorded in a series of photographs by using a single camera. Famous American inventor and entrepreneur Thomas Alva Edison was actually very much influenced by Maybridge's Praxinoscope projector. He actually wanted Praxinoscope to connect with his phonogram machine, the sound recording machine, to create a kind of combined machine that could actually capture image as well as sound. He was further inspired by Etienne Marie's chronophotographic gun, and his assistant W.K.L. Dixon was assigned to work on this project, and soon he was able to design a new gadget called Kinetograph, which was able to capture moving images on roll film. Roll film was invented few years before, after the invention of celluloid. So it was in 1887, Thomas Edison and W.K.L. Dixon patented their new development, new apparatus called kinetograph and kinetoscope. Kinetograph was the machine or the apparatus to record moving images, and kinetoscope was a kind of slot machine, a peep show machine to view this. It was in 1887, it was patented, and soon it became a kind of popular gadget. We have to keep in mind the kinetograph was more or less the modern movie camera, but kinetoscope was only a viewing machine for one person. It was a peep show machine, and it was also a slot machine that you have to insert a coin to see a 30-second shot. Soon, people in other parts of the world also become interested, and they were also experimenting. So around 1895, within a span of few years, almost simultaneously, the modified version of the cinematograph machine was invented almost simultaneously within a span of few months in 1895. Edison and Dixon came up with a modified version of kinetograph called Vitascope. Robert Paul in England developed his machine called Theaterograph. Lumiere brothers in France developed their machine called cinematograph, and Max and Emil Skladanowski developed their machine, their apparatus called bioscope. If we strictly go by the history, it was not Lumiere brother, it was not Thomas Edison, but it was Emil and Max Skladanowski, the two brothers. They projected their moving images first and before everybody else in the same year, 1895. As we have seen, the invention of cinematograph apparatus was a result of a complex technological inventions and innovations in which many known and unknown pioneers were involved. Film critic André Bazin was right to point out that early pioneers were driven by a vision of cinema in which the real world, with its movement, sound and color, was attempted to be reproduced photographically. There was no artistic pursuit behind any of these inventions. The race was to photograph movement and reproduce the same again and again for a paying audience. The invention of the apparatus called cinematograph was advertised as a scientific marvel. Cinema as an artistic medium was yet to arrive. Cinema, by inheriting the culture of magic lantern, became a kind of show that had the power to control people, power to hypnotize people, power to mesmerize people. A very powerful medium.